Let's talk about narcissists. The word narcissist comes from Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, there was a young, very handsome hunter called Narcissus. And one day he lay beside a pool of water to get a drink. When he looked into the pool of water, he noticed his own reflection and he thought it was wildly beautiful and he fell in love with it. And so, not to spoil his own image, he decided not to drink from the pool of water for fear of distorting it, which led to him dying. And in the place where his body lay bloomed a single flower, a narcissus, more commonly known today as the daffodil. 1% of the entire population are pathological narcissists who have narcissistic personality disorder. And when you happen to cross one of their sociopaths, you will discover that they are wildly insecure people who are addicted to feeling special, who end up having very, very little room for empathy. This is the psychology of narcissism and how to handle it. The word narcissist gets thrown around constantly now. Your boss is a narcissist. Your ex is a narcissist. One of your parents is a narcissist. Your friend who didn't text you back is now suddenly a narcissist. And the problem with that is when a word gets used for everything, it starts meaning nothing. But narcissism is definitely real, but it's also quite misunderstood. And if you're dealing with someone who genuinely has strong narcissistic traits, it can be very exhausting, confusing, and sometimes even deeply damaging. At its simplest level, narcissism is a pattern of excessive self-focus, combined with the fragile sense of self underneath it all. Understanding that is quite important because narcissism is not just confidence, and it's not just liking yourself. Healthy confidence says, I matter. But narcissism says, I matter more than you. And if you threaten that, I will defend it at all costs. Clinically, narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, is rare. As we said, about 1% of the population have it. But narcissistic toxic traits are much more common. And most of us at some point will show a few of them. The difference is rigidity. If someone occasionally needs validation, that's called being human. If someone cannot tolerate criticism without attacking or blaming someone else or collapsing, that's a pattern. And patterns are what we have to pay attention to. What narcissism looks like in real life, it doesn't always look like arrogance. That's kind of a stereotype. But often it looks like conversations that always circle back to them. Subtle competition instead of collaboration. The inability to genuinely apologize. Emotional reactions that feel disproportionate to the situation. Charm in public and coldness in private. And one of the most consistent signs, a lack of emotional reciprocity. You can support them for hours, but when it's your turn, they disappear, deflect, or minimize. And here's the confusing part. They might not even see it. In fact, they probably don't. And where narcissism often comes from, underneath most narcissistic behavior is shame. Not surface shame, but buried shame. It's like a child who learned I am only valuable when I perform, or I'm only safe when I'm admired, or I cannot afford to be wrong, or vulnerability equals danger. So the personality adapts, it builds armour. Self-importance becomes a shield. Superiority becomes a defense. And blame becomes a survival strategy. It's like saying, if I am always right, I never have to feel small. And if you're always wrong, I never have to question myself. But that doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does explain the mechanism. And understanding the mechanism is important, especially when you're dealing with it. So how to spot narcissistic patterns clearly? So instead of diagnosing the person, look for repeated dynamics. Ask yourself, do I feel heard in this relationship? Do I feel my boundaries are being respected? Do conflicts resolve, or do they just escalate and somehow become my fault? Can this person tolerate being wrong? A major red flag when it comes to these things is accountability avoidance. If every disagreement ends with you apologizing, or you doubting yourself, or you feeling that you're too sensitive to handle the situation. That's a pattern worth noticing. Another one is they often react very strongly to boundaries. A healthy person, for example, may not love your boundary, but they can definitely adjust to it. A narcissistic pattern often interprets boundaries as rejection or attack, and the reaction can appear as anger or guilt tripping or the silent treatment or a character assassination. Not always loudly now, because it's sometimes subtle, but it's consistently like this. And how do you deal with narcissistic behavior? First, and this can be hard to hear, you cannot fix them. You cannot love someone into self-awareness. If someone does not want to understand and believe that they are part of the problem, they will not and cannot change. So your strategy has to shift. It becomes about clarity, not correction. 1. Stop over-explaining. The more you justify yourself, the more material they have to twist. And sometimes twist back on you. Number 2, use clean boundaries, not emotional speeches. Short, firm statements. Things like, this doesn't work for me, or I'm not available for that. Or something like, I won't continue this conversation if it becomes personal, and you're making it personal. Number 3, never argue about reality. If someone repeatedly rewrites events, don't get pulled into endless proof battles. State your version once, clearly and calmly. That alone has the power to disarm a narcissist. Number 4, detach yourself from their validation. This is the hardest part, because if you need their approval, you are vulnerable to their control. Narcissistic dynamics often run on one fuel source: reaction. And the more emotionally reactive you are, the more leverage they have. That doesn't mean become cold. It means become regulated. And what if you're wondering about yourself? This is where we have to get a little bit honest, because if you're asking, what if I'm the narcissist? That question alone already suggests something important. Because true pathological narcissism rarely includes deep self-doubt, especially about being narcissistic. So the fact that you're even watching this video already says a lot. That being said, we all have ego. So here are 3 real checks. Can you genuinely apologize for something without adding a but? Can you tolerate being wrong without collapsing or attacking someone else? And finally, can you celebrate someone else's success without feeling diminished? If those things are hard sometimes, it's called being human. But if those are nearly impossible consistently, it's something worth exploring. Not even in shame, but in the interest of knowing yourself better, or in the interest of growth. Because narcissistic traits often soften with self-awareness. Defensiveness can be reduced when shame is addressed safely. And people can change, but only if they want to, and only if they see the pattern themselves. The emotional toll of dealing with narcissism is real, because being around narcissistic behavior for the long term can nearly make you doubt your own reality. You start rehearsing conversations in your head so you don't mess up. You second guess your tone the whole time. And then you minimize your own needs. That's you adapting, trying to make the relationship in question survive. But maybe that relationship shouldn't survive, or should be limited by boundaries. Because this adaptation becomes self-compromise if it goes on too long, and for the wrong reasons, and for the wrong person. So if you are dealing with this, ask yourself, am I shrinking to keep this relationship stable? Because that's usually the hidden cost. And no relationship is worth dissolving yourself for. Narcissism isn't just a villain story. It's a defensive structure built around a fragile ego or a fragile core. But fragility doesn't justify narcissism. Understanding someone's psychology doesn't mean tolerating their behavior. And if you're the one trying to grow away from someone like this. Set clearer boundaries, less emotional reactivity, and more self-trust, and fewer attempts to rescue people who don't want to be rescued. Because the goal here isn't to change others. It's just to protect yourself. My name is John. You're welcome to be here, and you're more than welcome to stay here.